Matthew Whitaker, the former acting attorney general of the United States, who has a fantastic new book out. And today is the day. Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. And he is joining us right now on Daybreak 92.5 Fox News. Sir, it's Drew Steele. How are you today?
Drew, I am so glad to be with you. I've listened to you when I visit Southwest Florida, and it's a place that I love being, and I wish I was there now.
Well, I appreciate that so much, and love that you visit here. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of Trump supporters. We have a lot of people who are going to be interested in purchasing this book, Above the Law, today at all your favorite outlets. And I really want to dig into the book, quite frankly, because boy, you know, there are so many questions even now in the past 48 hours. It seems like there's lately more and more information is coming up, and it really pertains to a lot of what you talk about in the book. But before we get started, I have to ask you this. I've been dying to ask you this question, so I'm so happy to have you on right now, and it's this. Early on, when everything was coming out about the Russian collusion hoax, when we had Jeff Sessions recusing himself in the confusion, and then James Comey, and then you have the Robert Mueller investigation, you have all of these things that are taking place. And through all of this tumultuous time, here you are, you're the in-between. You go from, you're the in-between between the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, and the Attorney General now, William Barr. And here you are in this unbelievably tumultuous moment in our history. Can you describe what that was like to walk into that position at that time? And then to, as you explain in the book that we'll dig into, Above the Law, all the things that you come to find out. What was that like to be in that position?
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, was to give an inside account as to my experience as the acting attorney general that was Jeff Sessions' chief of staff, was suddenly put at the head of the Department of Justice, and then shook hands with Bill Barr and, sort of went back into the private sector. But, I think it's all really evidenced from, my hearing in February of last year in front of the House Judiciary Committee. And if you remember that day, as much as I do, it was extraordinary. It was where I famously told the chairman, Nadler, that his 5 minutes were up. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people wanted some pushback from the administration as to not only Democrats and the media and really their false narratives that they were putting out there, but, obviously the president wanted others to fight for him. And it was an honor of a lifetime to serve in his administration, and it was also an honor to fight for him on behalf of his agenda. And that's, in this book, Above the Law, that's what I lay out, is sort of that experience. But at the same time, I also wanted to accurately account for the events that surrounded the Mueller investigation and how he was appointed, why he was appointed, and question whether he even should have been appointed and whether the special counsel regulation is necessary and or constitutional. So, Drew, there's just, there's so much to unpack, and and it's really, but it was an amazing time. It was an honor of a lifetime. But I did feel like I was, swinging every day. You had to get up and fight.
Yeah, and I can't imagine, and that's what, to me, is a part of what is so fascinating. And I'm sure when everyone digs into this book, Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump, when you dig into the book and you realize, because I think that context is so important, Mr. Whitaker, I think it's crucial, because the fact that you were put into this position at that moment in time, and then to understand all the things that were happening at the time, and then to have to fight against a deep state that is very real, and maybe you can speak to this as well, how complicit the media has been in all of this, and even now, and even as more evidence comes out, even as you have the Attorney General now, Bill Barr, who is saying things that the president has been saying all the time, which is, this should never happen to anybody. He doesn't say Republicans. He says Republicans and Democrats. This is something that we should never see, what happened in the 2016 election, all the things that we know took place. Can you speak to some of the complicity of the mainstream and this media that has been on board since day one and even now?
Yeah, I think there's one moment in time that I would love to take your listeners back to, and that is when the New York Times ran a story. They claimed they had sources that there were multiple interactions between the people on the Trump campaign and the Russian government. I mean, it was written as if it had happened. It was written as if it was true. And then we see the Mueller report ultimately almost 2 years later, which said there was no evidence of any interactions between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. And so, I mean, that just tells you, not only the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of the major news outlets were all on the same talking points, and that there was this illegal relationship and that there was no evidence of. There never was evidence of. And one of the first things, and one of the things I talk about in this book, Drew, is how when I got read into the Mueller investigation, how my heart sank because the first thing they told me is, we haven't found any evidence. And I just thought, this is a complete waste of time and money. And it's a shame, but, it's over now. And the last thing I want to do is end it prematurely, because I was being told it was any day I should expect a report. And that was my entire time of acting Attorney General. I expected any day could be the day when I got the Mueller report. Ultimately, after I left, Barr got it approximately 6 weeks later. And we see what that was. It was, essentially, it should have completely exonerated the president. It did exonerate the president, but because they wanted to give cookie crumbs to Congress to possibly impeach him, they wrote Part 2, which was all about alleged attempts to obstruct justice, which were completely inconsistent with the law, and that was so disappointing. And that's I explain that all in this book, and I think it's very important for everyone to see it lay out in black and white as to how abhorrent this moment in time and this period in time, and how shameful it was for the Department of Justice to be, kind of leading that effort.
Yeah. Matthew Whitaker joining us on Daybreak 92.5 Fox News' new book out today, Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. Please, I am insisting that you go and get this book, because this is the kind of information, again, that you need to have, you need to tuck in your back pocket, and you need to know about when there are people that in the media right now, and quite frankly, those on the left, who are going to continue to push conspiracy theory ideas and narratives, that when we say things like, and you probably would know better than anyone as you hear even the news of the day with Mike Flynn, what has happened with the Mike Flynn issue, how the judge is now starting to make things up, decide that that a judge is going to say, well, there's nothing to see here. We have to continue to have a case in front of Mike Flynn now, that even though the evidence would show and was already out there that Mike Flynn did not lie, that we have evidence that's out there now, and the concerns about how involved the administration was in this masking or unmasking. I even wonder with that issue, and if you can speak to that, was he unmasked? It almost appears as if, as the latest information comes out, that he wasn't masked to begin with, because of the fact that there were no unmasking requests that even happened immediately after the phone call with Kislyak took place. So what kind of questions are out there even for you right now with regard to that?
Drew, you're raising two, if not more, very important points. I think, first of all, you're right. Based on what we know, the phone call that everyone believes, existed on December 29th of 2016, and then was discussed in the White House by the president, vice president, and many others on January 5th, no unmasking requests were made. And so that suggests, because the FBI knew about that call days before that meeting at the White House, and in that period of time, there's not a single masking request based on everything we've learned from what the DNI, acting DNI Grinnell has issued. We know that something strange is happening here, and we need, I would say, immediate answers. And that's again, one of the themes of my book is that we need accountability on not only the Flynn investigation, but so many of these decisions that were made because they do not look consistent with regular order or the policies of the Department of Justice and the FBI. On the Flynn court proceeding, this judge appears to be making up extrajudicial proceedings that are not in the federal rules of criminal procedure. Every first-year law student learns those, and I'm very concerned that there's going to be some public, prosecution of Flynn through some procedure that doesn't even exist because this judge, doesn't like the president and doesn't like the administration. It's very concerning, and I really hope that what he's doing ultimately doesn't happen, because I think this is, well within Department of Justice ability to, dismiss this case.
Yeah.
They have complete discretion whether to pursue a prosecution or not, whether to walk away from a prosecution or not. And really the judge has no discretion and should really immediately after that court filing to dismiss should just act on that motion without some extra, sort of quasi-prosecutor appointment by the court.
Right. And to say nothing about setting precedent. What a horrible precedent to set. That you would.
Well, it'll get, Drew, I mean, in all seriousness, it'll get overturned immediately, if not at the appellate level, but by the Supreme Court, because this is inconsistent with the American system of justice. And this judge is, above the law, as they say.
I like what you did there. You see, that's how you do it. Yeah, that's Matthew Whitaker joining us on Daybreak 92.5 Fox News. The former acting attorney general of the United States, his new book, Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. You can get it right now. And, as you see the cover, and I talked about you and I talked about a little bit about the book and the situations that all of us have been talking about for months and years about the deep state and the situation, and you see the cover, Above the Law, and it's the one thing that everybody wants the answer to. Is that who's above the law? Quite honestly, it brings up that question that I'm sure you've been asked a million times. When do we see some prosecution? When do we see indictments? When do we see anything that would suggest that people will be held accountable? Because it feels like every single name that you have talked about, that you talk about in the book, that is from James Comey to Robert Mueller to the corrupt individuals that I'll say are corrupt, the ones that were helping Robert Mueller to all types of individuals that are out there that were part of this deep state and the taking down of the president. The question remains: when will we see something happen? Is everybody above the law now? Is that what we're led to expect?
Yeah, and no one is above the law.
Right.
We are a nation of law, and, American people and everyone I talk to, and back when you could travel around and I'd, visit not only my home state of Iowa, but really all over the country, and including, places like Naples and Fort Myers and all those beautiful places that I love to visit, I would hear one thing, and it's when is somebody or somebody's going to be held accountable for what we went through, at the end of the Obama administration and into the Trump administration. And, I don't want to get ahead of John Durham or Bill Barr. I think they're, obviously going to get to the truth. They're going to give a full accounting of what happened. As to this, I saw it with my own eyes. But I thought the Attorney General Barr was very clear yesterday that while he said there was no evidence to criminally investigate Obama or Biden, and I know that disappointed a lot of your listeners, he did say that there are other targets, criminal targets of the investigation. And I think that should be good news for those that believe in truth and justice and accountability. And so, whatever happens, there has to be complete transparency from the FBI and the DOJ as to how this investigation started, what the origins of the investigation were. And, not only when poor judgment or decision making was made, but where, quite frankly, where people cut corners or violated the law, I think all of those need to be exposed and, if appropriate, be prosecuted.
Yeah. And I wonder if when the Attorney General was saying that, talking about the former president and the former vice president specifically, concerning charges or or investigations or looking into, does that necessarily mean that just because that was said, that you couldn't look and say, all right, so nothing that they can see now is criminal, but there are some people that did some activities that may very well be criminal. Doesn't it say that for now that's the position, but possibly if there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt that everybody can, kind of put the puzzle together and it points to one of those two individuals or both, is it possible to speculate that that could be a possibility and you ultimately can end up there as long as you have the proof beyond reasonable doubt, which is what we're looking for?
Yeah, you need evidence. And I think that's what sometimes, we want to use the same kind of standard that the Obama Department of Justice used, which was, sort of just a suspicion and with no evidence or a belief or a narrative. And that's what Bill Barr is restoring to the Department of Justice, is that the proper predication of these investigations, because it is pretty clear right now, and I think we're going to learn more, but it's pretty clear that the investigation for sure into President Trump was not properly predicated. As I discussed in the book at length, Andy McCabe essentially single-handedly made that decision solely because Jim Comey was fired by the president based on a recommendation of Rod Rosenstein, who appointed Bob Mueller. And so, so that's one. I think there was, Flynn was another case where not only did it appear that the investigation into General Flynn wasn't properly predicated, which means there was no evidence that a crime had been committed, but, they also, inconsistent with past policy and practice at the FBI and at the White House, they sent agents over there to improperly interview him. And the interview and what he said wasn't even material to any investigation that was open. And so, you look at just those two pieces and that this can't happen. And this is why I think we need to have so much faith in what Barr is doing. And also, if you remember, take your listeners back to the Hillary Clinton email investigation or the Mueller investigation, both which were, again, originated by Jim Comey and Andy McCabe and Peter Strzok, all on the cover of my book. We're not hearing any leaks out of the Durham investigation. The only things we're hearing is where Bill Barr believes it's appropriate to update the American people as to, sort of the timing of the investigation or the scope of the investigation. So I think the American people should know that Bill Barr has restored the Department of Justice to the place where it should be, where investigations into American citizens aren't high profile and are not publicly leaked or otherwise promoted, for the, selfish interests of the people at the top of the FBI. So I'm pretty confident that ultimately people will be held accountable and will have full transparency as to what happened and to make sure this never happens again.
And if you want to know why and you want to know what happened and you want to get the details, please go out. Today is the day. Get the book Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. It's at all your favorite locations and you know where to go. Get it today. And Matthew Whitaker joining us on Daybreak 92.5 Fox News. Sir, it was a pleasure. I hope we get a chance to do this again soon. I have a lot of things I would love to dig in.
Once we can, I can do a book tour. I'm planning on coming down there and doing a book signing, so I will make sure to stop by and say hello.
That would be fantastic. All right, all the best, and we'll speak soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew. See you soon.
I'll see you.
Drew Steele.